All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Robert Vidigal. I'm your Wisdom host. I'm very excited to kick off the 2026 spring series of the workshop in international survey methods. And today I'm very excited to have Alexia Katsanidou with us today, who leads the GESIS Department of Survey Data Curation. She's a comparative political scientist and professor of empirical social research at the University of Cologne with a PhD in politics from Access University. Her work explores how crises and inequalities shape political attitudes, behaviors, and spans multiple countries and regions. And today, Alexa will be presenting this work titled Interoperability Challenges in European Research Data Structures. So Alexa, please take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm very happy to see so many different people here and so many faces that I know. Um, so thank you for coming, everybody. I will be giving you actually an overview of what's going on in Europe about the challenges that we have in interoperability questions. And bear with me because many of you might know some of it, many of you might not know any of it. And if I do some name dropping you don't understand, raise your hand and please tell me to explain all the weird acronyms I'll be using. But before I start all of that, thank you for the introduction, Robert. Again, I would like to tell you a little bit about GESIS so you know where I come from. So the past 16 years, my God, I've been working at GESIS. That is a Leibniz Institute for the Social Sciences. But to you all, is basically an infrastructure of a data infrastructure, a research data infrastructure in Germany, but we cater for Europe. And let me see if I can click. Yes. And basically, we have the pride of being the largest in Europe, and we focus only on quantitative empirical research across the social sciences. Many of us have accused us that we don't do psychology. The truth is, we don't cater too much on all psychologists, but all the rest we do. So that's good. And in our portfolio, we have survey research. So we collect a lot of surveys that you might recognize. I'll show you in a moment. But we also have digital behavioral data, so social media data, but also scraping digital behavioral data from individuals from different platforms. So what we focus on, we integrate linked information on data, but also literature and research projects. So we try to capture the full cycle around research, and that is the full cycle around research design, if you want. We have our own survey programs, but we also cater to other survey programs, and we also do research, surprisingly enough, on contemporary societal issues, where my main contribution is political science, but also other stuff like computation, social sciences, applied computer sciences, and research data management. And we also train people. That's nice sometimes. Yeah, that Leibniz Association is not very important, but we structure our services around the research data cycle. You might recognize some phases from your own work. We plan studies, so we help people planning studies, and we help people collecting data. We help people finding existing data and accessing those data, including our own data collections, but also our community data collection. And we support people in processing and analyzing data. I will be talking a lot about this today, especially about data linking. And of course, we archive data and we share data. So it's equivalent to ICPSR, for example, from those of you familiar with the US infrastructure. I'm showing you just what we collect, so you might recognize one or the other. These are the German studies that we do. Um, Maybe you know the GLES, that is a German longitudinal election study. That is a election study with a lot of components. That is, and not just a post-election. We have the European Social Survey, the German component. You might know that one, but we also cater, for example, for studies that are not collected at GESIS, but for example, the European Commission, so the Eurobarometer, and we curate it here at GESIS to make sure that the average researcher can actually understand it. Because if you only rely on the Commission, most likely it will be not very easily to understand. We also do international data, ISSP, the CSCS, and PIAC. The CSCS together with Vanderbilt now, so it's an honor to be here and share our ideas and thoughts. For ISSP and CSCS, we have the secretariat or co-host the secretariat together with others. Okay, I will start about the problem of interoperability, or rather, what was the problem that interoperability is the answer. So in many of our research foci, for example, sociology, political science, economics, and so on, we work with data silos. Research data is stored on local drives. How many of you have done it? Raise your hand. You collected data and you never gave it out to see the sunlight in any sort of way. Or they are landing in proprietary databases or in departmental silos, so only your department had access to it or only your university, rather than to put it in an accessible repository, making it possible for others to locate. So mainly data are hidden. So this is a problem of data not being findable, so we want to make them findable. The second problem that we have is that even though the data could be findable, that you can locate it, you might not able to access it. So for example, say you read a very nice paper, a published article, it tells you that a data set exists, you click on it, and the link is broken. Or when you try to download it, it's like in an ancient format or a weird format that you cannot use. The solution to that problem is to make sure that the data is, of course, accessible by humans, but also by machines. The other problem we have is the lack of standardization. Sometimes we collect data and we haven't used other data of that type before, and we just invent a new format. We invent a new vocabulary, or we don't use existing metadata standards and we create our own metadata, labeling variables in specific ways that nobody understands but us. So that way we'll prevent it from being combinable with other data sets, or even worse, we can't let it be analyzed by any software that people know, or even more AI tools. Nowadays, that is another issue adding to our problems. So the solution to that problem is to have the data interoperable, and this is the focus of today's topic. Finally, low reusability is an issue. We invest, that's it. We invest so much money to collect data. And the ideal situation is once this data is collected and used to create the primary research, the ideal would be that this data can be reused. But without proper metadata, context, provenance, licensing, this data cannot be understood, cannot be verified, cannot be reproduced in any sort of way. And that is the reason we cannot reuse. So aim is to make data reusable. So this problem had a solution. Findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, FAIR. Some of you are deep into the FAIR community. I see some faces, but some of you are not. So in Europe, we like it fair. And when I'm talking fair, in general, let's stick to the data so we don't go into politics, but we like it fair. And what does this mean in particular? It means that data is assigned unique identifiers, for example, the DOIs you have been used to, that helps us to identify them uniquely every time that we click on it. It can be described with rich and searchable metadata. The data is retrievable through standards and open protocols, and ensuring that they can be used both by us and by machines, hint, hint, AI. Interoperability here focuses on using data that have formal shared languages and vocabularies, so they refer to ontologies that are structured, and allow us to work with them across different platforms. And finally, reusability. Data should be well documented, both on the study level and on the variable level, hint, hint, surveys. You know more than me how that is important, and has clear licensing so people can use it and know how to use it, what is allowed and what is not allowed. So implementing interoperability is done on various levels. We have the technical interoperability, that is the basic. So do we have the ability of our systems to exchange data and metadata? Can we open the data and so on? Then we have the structural interoperability that defines the format or the structure of the data exchange. So for example, the data models that we need. So the data can talk to each other and know on what level they should be connected. The semantic interoperability, which is the major problem of scientists, where we ensure the precise meaning of the information and that is understood by everybody in the same way, and that normally until now is achieved through good vocabulary, structured vocabularies, and ontologies. And finally, the organizational or legal interoperability, that is what we aim for when we create intergovernmental infrastructures or European level infrastructures. This is more problematic, but we're working on it. Now, back to the problem. This is the structure of the data that we're used to. We have a two-dimensional structure, we have variables, we have observations, and we have, of course, the values for each one. This is why nicely structured, and one could say there should be no problem, right? Everybody understands. However, let me go through a few of the questions that we pose ourselves when we start a research question. Imagine that you are using two data sets, and simply enough, you want to identify, let's say, the position, the political party that a specific person voted for. Does the variable, let's say X, that identifies it's called X001, really mean the same as the variable X001 in a second data set? Is it the variable that really measures the political party or what the individual voted for? And how is it coded? In the other direction, what if they actually are the same thing, but they are labeled differently? The one variable is called vote, and the other one is called, I don't know, decision on ballot before the ballot box, like a long variable question. Other questions, is the structure of my dataset actually correct? Or do I need to stack, for example? Do I need to recreate, to have a wide or a long version of the dataset for some reason? Can it be harmonized with other datasets? For example, I ask the same question or similar questions across various surveys, but I need to create a harmonization across the board. Am I asking the same thing? Typical question I've been dealing with lately is if you ask about gender equality, does it mean the same thing across time? It doesn't, because the world is evolving, and we don't always map the same variables across time. And if we keep asking the same question, is it mapping in the same ontology? Can it be linked with other data sets? So if we say you vote for a political party and you live, let's say, in a county X, if that county has changed the boundaries over time, how can you know for sure what to link it for? You have to know exactly the date, you have to know exactly the county, you have to know exactly when the geographical information has been collected, and so on. These kind of questions, they have been tried to addressed through national solutions. I give you only two here very quickly. National consortia trying to focus on creating interoperability within the social sciences. I give you the example of Odyssey in the Netherlands, the open data infrastructure for social sciences and economics. And the NFTE for society. NFTE is the National Research Data Infrastructure in Germany and has silos, if you want, between the different sciences. And the one for social sciences is a consort SVD, NFTE for society. So within these infrastructures, we try to create solutions, but of course they are idiosyncratic within the country. But as you very well know, research is not national, it's international. We collaborate with colleagues across the board, across the globe. So our data cannot be interoperable only within the country. They have to be interoperable across. So let's see what other examples we have. I give you some examples of interoperability on two specific dimensions, the geographical dimension and the political entity dimension, where I suppose you can recognize yourselves again. So imagine you have a survey and you have the address of the individual respondents. Based on the address, you can, of course, transform the address into coordinates. And these coordinates you can use to identify locations in various ways. So the actual point coordinates, the polygons, the grid cells, and you also have the temporal reference on it, interview date or exposure to a certain event. Using this information, you can link the answers of this individual with information that are connected to the point, so the point coordinates, the polygons or the grid cells, information about environmental conditions, specific events that happen in the area, weather events, protest events, whatever you consider important for your research question. And this thing we have done in three of our own GESIS data collections, the albos. We connected it, for example, with traffic noise to understand the well-being of the respondents. We did it with GESIS panel to understand the soil sealing percentage and see to what extent the soil sealing is connected to the well-being and the inequalities in the area, or the perceived inequalities, if you want. And the GLES, that the German longitudinal election study, that we connected on the grid level with immigrant rate. So how many, what is the percentage of immigrant population in your grid? So based on this, you can see, in order to do the linking correctly, you need to know what level of geographical aggregation you have, but also you need to know when, so the temporal component. I bring you a case study of the Christmas floods in 2023-24, where we linked our respondents' data from the GESIS panel, so georeference data, with their distance to the event of flooding in the Christmas time, 2023-24. And we link them to the responses of the item on subjective risk perceptions and climate change attribution and policy preferences. You can see exactly where the floods took place. And on the left-hand side here, you see the flood risk perception. So the lower the numbers, on the bottom is lower risk perception, and on towards the higher part is the higher risk perception. And on the left-hand side is living exactly in the area of the floods. And as we go to the right, it's the distance to the emergency areas increases. And you can see before the event, there was no difference where you lived on your perception of flood risk. While after the event, the distance to the actual location made a difference. So among those people living close or in the flooded area, the risk perception was higher than among those who lived, 200, 300, 400 kilometers away. So this is already a clear, it shows clearly the impact of distance on perceptions and attitudes. What did we need? What sort of infrastructures did we need to do that? Of course, GESIS, who does the data collection and the linkage. We needed, though, also on the right-hand side, the data from Copernicus, that is a European infrastructure collecting all kinds of Earth observation data, and it offers it free for linkage. This is something everybody can access. You don't have to be in Europe to access it. And of course, we needed CESTA. This is a European Research Infrastructure Consortium, and ERIC, we call them, and they set the standards for us. So it started as a community exercise, and it ended up as something that is like intergovernmental infrastructure that sets the standards and supports us in our work of making sure that our data are interoperable. Let's go to entity-based linking. For those of you who work on political science, you know that we ask people what they voted for example, or what is their preferences in a specific party, or would they ever vote a specific party, or on a scale from X to Y, from 0 to 10, where does this party is positioned in whatever policy. And in order to link here, of course, let's say we have dataset 1 that is a survey, but we also have information on political parties on different datasets. So we need to create some sort of data model that allows us to link different datasets on the party level. If we want, we can expand it. We need countries, for example, because people like me work on comparative politics, so or the CSCS works on comparative politics, and we need country. We need also a temporal element, which party was a predecessor of another party, and we need also politicians. Just to make it more tangible, here is an example. For those of you who might know the German system, this is a political party, Die Linke, the left, it's called. Is the predecessor of PDS, an older party, and then Sarah Wagenknecht is one of its members until a specific time. So we get information about the Linke on a survey, for example, but also from the manifesto project coding its manifestos, from Wikipedia explaining the political party, and from the Chapel Hill expert survey, for example, where experts position every party. And the questions here that we have is that what happens if you want to link the data? So if you want to link data from Chapel Hill to data from Wikipedia or the Manifesto project, you need the links between the three entities. But if we go through the link in itself, we could create some sort of linkage model or a linkage platform that translates, if you want, the codes from from the Chapel Hill data to Wikipedia to Manifesto project. And then, of course, we have the time and geographical references because, for example, Sarah Wagenknecht left the Linke at some point, created a new party. So you have to know exactly when you want to link. And you need to have also geographical references because what happens if borders change? So the predecessor party was also active in previous forms of Germany before the Euro unification. So you have to know when and where. In order for this to be possible, we have to refer back to the European level this time. And here you see two logos that are quite difficult to explain, but I'll try. So I also refer to CESTA, that is one of the ERICs. The science clusters is research infrastructures for open science. Think about it as the NFT that we talked about in Germany, but this is for the European level, and it has different clusters in each of the science groups. And there is a cluster called SHOC, it's the social science and humanities, SHOC. And in there are all the infrastructures for the social sciences. And EOSC is the European Open Science Cloud that collects tools for us to ensure open science. Here is the overview of these clusters. And as you can see, SHOC is on the right-hand side, is where we are. And these are some of the most relevant ERICs So members of the SHOC. CESTA is the archives holding all the surveys that we use. The European Social Survey, you might have seen. It's one of the most important European comparative surveys for the social sciences. SHARE is a survey that captures mainly the older generations and towards the end of life, focusing on the well-being of elderly people. And Clarin is a common language resource and technology infrastructure that focuses on how we use language. So nowadays, very important for LLMs, for example. And in my next 10 minutes, I will introduce you to one infrastructure that is close to my heart. And I'm in the steering committee. We are developing a new infrastructure on democracy research. MEDEM is called Monitoring Electoral Democracy. And the reason we want it is because we have various groups of people independently of each other working on different types of data. So if you ask a question about, if you're in the media on the communication side of things, you code print and online news data. If you are, no, there. Wait a minute. Yeah, if you are into understanding the citizens and how they behave and why they think, you collect population survey data, where it's my business and I'm assuming also your business. Other people focus, for example, on party manifesto data because they want to understand how political parties present their ideas, or they want to focus on different ways of understanding, like party research or political groups or interest groups and so on. But in order to bring everything together, we need the orchestra of democratic research and making sure that all of these data collections are actually interoperable. These are some networks, or maybe all the networks, there are 36 of them, that give data to MEDEM, and they have signed a memorandums of understanding, sorry, that's it, MOUs. And the idea is that all these data networks give their data and make sure that there is interoperability happening between them. So the Chapel Hill Expert Survey should be able to talk with the European Election Study. The CSES should be able to talk with the CAP and so on. So you see that there is an attempt to ensure that everybody can be talking to everybody. In practice, that means for MEDEM that it does a lot of actual annotation work. Going back to the idea of making data interoperable through using structured vocabularies and ontologies. So imagine that each one of these data networks, let's say the CSES, is giving an original data set, a code book, and also the literature that is used for the literature that is produced, by people using the CSES. MEDEM brings all of this together by identifying the European rationalizations behind the survey questions and creates a variable to concept mapping. So the variables that are in the data sets are connected to the actual concepts behind it. Let's say you ask a question, how interested are you in politics? And the concept is obviously political interest. But there are some others that are more complicated. And also it connects it to real world entities, like what I showed you on the political parties linkage. So we have the original data set, and on top of it, we get the MEDEM annotations. And that happens on many data sets, and they are connected to each other. So that is the extra added layer that MEDEM can offer. And here the concepts in a pluralistic concept system are linked with variables across the data sets, and we have the entity IDs that's linked in rows across the data sets. Entity IDs like political parties, media outlets, and so on. The data sets are harmonized, and there is linkage across data types in space, across space and across time. And the idea here is that we provide then online tools and services that make sure that you, as researchers, don't have to waste the first 2 years of your research grant on linking or harmonizing the data, but it's done immediately. You just have to check it to make sure that everything is there, what you need. So you gain time and your research is accelerated. That is an important message to take home here. So we foster the emergence, development, integration of multiple research networks, groups, and projects. And it's done across different partners. So we have the data centers, so the centers are focused on specific data types. Then we have an interoperability service center, a linked service center here at GESIS, and also the platform service center that makes sure that everything comes together and is linked. And the headquarters is in Vienna. Yeah, so going back to the entity model, the data model behind it, you see that we have several data sets and the same entities appear in almost every data set, and we're making sure that through these entities we link all the data sets together so you can mix and match whenever you want. So back to the basics, the idea here is that interoperability is on the one hand important already when every one of us as a researcher starts the work, like use a widely known system within your research community, use data formats and data models that your fellow researchers can understand, and don't create everything from scratch. And if you do create anything from scratch, do it within your community. When creating a new survey question, for example, connect it to a concept and making sure that this is documented. And always, always, always go refer back to your community. We are not islands, we are connected. And if I am allowed to add one more layer, all this started before AI. Now with AI, we are back to fair square, if you want. So fair has to be even more fair because machines have to be able to read. They should be able to understand the structure, the provenance, and need full transparency for the data sets. They need context-rich metadata, specifically data that are understandable for this specific discipline, so they can be connected directly to your research question. And in general, data that are well documented, they are AI ready, so they are easily used, found, and integrated. Yeah, and in general, we're working now as an infrastructure very much onto this AI readiness. We're not there yet, but we're trying. So the important thing here is even when data are findable and accessible, doesn't mean that they are really interoperable. We have real problems, for example, a semantic misalignment where same variable name is used for different concepts or different labels, weak harmonization of measures. Let's say that we have a 5-point scale and 10-point scale and 11-point scale for the same thing. So we really have to work on how to teach the AI, the machine, to understand it. We have identifier ambiguity, inconsistencies because we're humans and we're inconsistent. That's how it is. We have structural heterogeneity, where we have diverging file formats, data schemas, and limited machine-readable metadata. The best of us make mistakes here. And the consequences is that we end up as researchers, as individuals, wasting, if you want, our time on data wrangling and cleaning and all that. So we have difficulties in automation. So the bottom line is we're progressing on FAIR, but AI readiness is far from ready. What we need is deeper standardization, deeper harmonization, and more actionable, machine readable metadata. And for me, the most important message for you to take home is that we need infrastructure, we need our community, and we need a layer of governance. And when we're working alone, it's difficult to have that. But the best initiative started from getting together in conferences. So that's a good message to take home. I remember that these discussions for me started with colleagues from the ICPSR, for example, in the IASIS community, so data management community. So people engage in groups, and that is extremely helpful. And with that, I thank you and I stop. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Alexia. So let's open the floor. Tom, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexia. Um, to what extent do you think this work that you describe, I guess focusing on interoperability, like lends itself sort of naturally to, our academic incentives are, most people are kind of theory and empirically driven um, workers out there in the fields. And I guess it strikes me that there might be some portion of this work that really taps into like incentives to create um, products, resources, outcomes that are that really call on our domain knowledge, and our empirical knowledge. So for example, that data model of the party that you had up there in a few, I mean that's a rendering of what I might publish in a piece, but of course I never use or build that. I don't know what you would call it, an ontology or something like that. Um, so that's the general question. Like,
That's a
are
data
there
model. Yeah. Mhm.
are there how do you see, garden variety political scientists like joining this effort, apart from the governance and the collaboration? I totally get that. But are there things we could do in our own knowledge production efforts, to work in this direction? Thanks.
Yeah, this is an incentive problem, if I understand it correctly, right? I mean, we function on the basis of what is measured and what is counts in our CVs basically, and what counts is publications. But I remember a time, and most of you too, where publishing a data set didn't count. It didn't count for your Google Scholar index and so on, but nowadays it does. So the incentive structure has changed over time, and publishing a data set already gives you a boost. And publishing, we can also publish an article describing a data model and so on. So this is the incentive structure has changed, and people become recognized for this kind of work. We can push it further, so that's for sure the case. And that's the one point. And the other thing that I see that is very important is the communities of people. So in um, in Europe, we have, for example, the ECPR and the European Political Science Association, and so on. And there, within the conferences, you create some sort of belonging, and people recognize the problems, and everybody came up with the same problem, so the same linkage question. And especially those people who are in groups and try to collect data again and again and again and again in the same group because an election happens every 4 years. They face the same problems. So they try to find solutions. And when they try to find solutions for these problems, they look around and they see what the others have been doing. And that's how the first governance structure has been created. So I think what we can do is basically look around us. The Germans have a nice way of describing it. Look outside the edge of your plate. So don't only look at your own food, look at the food of the others. And that helps us to, first of all, exchange, and secondly, also promote this kind of work. I don't know if it helps as an answer, but to be honest with you, in the EU especially, has been a lot of investment as well. So money helps as well in that kind of situation. If there is money to do projects, it helps.
Anyone else? You can type in the chat. You can unmute yourself.
I'll ask a question.
Nice.
Thanks, Alexia. Really great talk and thought-provoking. You mentioned a few times AI, and I'd be curious just to welcome you to speak more about, in your current role at GESIS, how you all are incorporating it or not, or handling it toward the future. I have in mind some of the data harmonization discussions we've had as part of broader collegial groups that even just 2 years ago, starting to work on a certain coding project, it's a real question now. How could, or should that be different moving forward? So any thoughts and also any resources you might have to share with all of us who are thinking of this?
That's a difficult question. I have we have at GESIS codified, if you want, 3 ways that AI is influencing our work. Apart from the obvious, obviously, but the first one, it's about how we collect our data. So how we use AI to develop new questionnaires, learn from so do it faster, test it faster. How do we actually capture respondents? How do we question respondents through AI and so on? This is the one stream of work. The second stream of work is how do we use AI in order to make our curating work more accurate and more better documented and faster. Here we have a specific problem, I can tell you. Most of our work is semi-automated anyway. So generative AI doesn't necessarily help us in that perspective, but it helps us with the coding, so we code faster. But the real issue behind this is most of our work, so the 99.9% of our work is automated, and it doesn't have any problems. But it's always these exceptions, the 5 cases, the one variable that doesn't work, and it causes so much problem in the curation, and AI cannot help you because AI is a probability based, and this is really an issue of non-probability. It shouldn't be happening because it's not probable, So we don't really know how to capture this better. And the third is creating data that are AI readable, ready to go for AI. And here we have some real ethical and legal questions that are obviously not clear yet. Because what I've seen is that the students, especially, and some researchers as well, they want to immediately upload a data set and get out the graphs. Doesn't work, obviously, because AI cannot really not very nicely read 2-dimensional data, even though Tom has ideas on how to do it. But there we have problems within the infrastructure, if you want, because we have diverging opinions. We have the purists who don't want to give the data to the AI, because obviously if you bring our survey and also some other interesting data to the AI, the de-anonymization is very easy. But we also have our computer scientists who have developed ways of translating the matrix, so not the matrix, but the matrices, the data sets into prompts, and help the AI understand what is in the data and create a way of asking the data and giving answers in a chat. So that's also an interesting thing. Now, back to your question on harmonization. What is easier done in terms of harmonization is this connection of variable and questionnaire question, a survey question, with a concept, and then connecting also back to the literature, because this can be done faster and better documented for the AI. I don't have anything to share in terms of resources. Maybe Tom has, I don't know. But yeah, we're still working on that. We're playing a lot right now. It's something we work a lot on.
Excellent. Thank you.
Who's next? Well, while you guys get your thoughts together, I want to ask a question, Alexia. Uh, it's a very impressive presentation. So many data networks. I think you mentioned 36. It's a very impressive data structure in Europe. And you mentioned something about online tools, services that can like speed up or promote more like integration. I was curious to understand better, like what do you mean with that? Do you mean more like, data playgrounds, maybe question search tools, or like since we're talking about AI, like a chatbot, or do you mean more in the sense of like data harmonization and open access to data sets?
I mean linking on the fly, so tools where you click on the variables that
Mm-hmm.
are interesting for you, and it creates either a data set or a syntax or like a do file or R syntax
Yeah.
for you to link existing data sets based on a specific variable that you need. So let's say that back in the day when I was doing my PhD long time ago, I wanted to connect across Europe the answers of citizens who voted for a specific party with the position of the specific party. Now, if you're in the US, you don't have many parties, it's easy. But if you're in Europe and you do a cross-cultural, cross-national study, that can be more than 250 or 300 parties who change names, and um, they come up with different names depending on what language you use, and different abbreviations, and it's all complicated. And I remember spending weeks tracing down how to call its particular date, political party, to make sure that the linking works. And you're not an expert normally in all political parties across a continent, so you really have to rely on the expertise of other people. In that case, click, click, and in half an hour, I would have my dataset instead of weeks of researching. Of course, back then I owned my data. I knew everything in the end, but maybe sometimes you don't need to know everything. You just need to do it quick and dirty.
Yeah, we have time for one more question. All right, I guess no more questions unless Tone.
Well, I mean, I don't want to hog the time here. I
You're
guess one
good.
one question I have is like as I listened to you, Alexia, I noticed how kind of integrated, you are um, across disciplines, kind of observing what other fields are doing maybe and learning from them. And I have a sense that, a lot of this interesting work that's happening in Europe is derived from that kind of perspectives. Um, I wonder, so that's just an observation, but the question would be like, sitting here in my perch in the US, I've noticed a couple other fields. I was working in a data science unit and just noticed that in biology, like I could name a couple fields. Most of them are like life sciences that are super advanced with these capabilities. They've been doing it in some cases for decades, really. And in a sense, they're mature, they're ready. They've accomplished some of what you've described for their disciplines or their subfields. Genetics, there's the gene ontology, for example.
Mhm.
Where would you say is like a maybe a more proximate community, a disciplinary type community that, or within political science? I mean, we're talking about survey research here, I guess. But where do you think like who can we learn from?
Mm.
Who's doing well in that disciplinary type sense?
So these days, I'm trying to learn a lot from the natural sciences, climate change research, because what they do is they come from very different disciplines. I mean, among them, they're very different. I mean, from where I stand, they all look the same to me, but um, you have people measuring water and water change. You have people working on the soil, you have people on the air, aviation research and satellites. everything imaginable. So they have so many different data types, but they manage to bring them all together in one infrastructure with one major ontology. And to me, that is a huge achievement. And I am trying to get us as social scientists into this business or into this ontology as well, because we share the same earth. It's basically geography, their business. That's why the geolocations. But apart from that, I think one discipline where we can learn a lot from their metadata standards and the way that they connect the data is epidemiology, because they deal with people same way with us as us. They deal with viruses, and they also it's very similar, not in the pragmatic sense, but very similar in terms of data with the political entities that we are looking at, and they connect populations with viruses. So that could be also something that we can learn from because of their data structures and ontologies. So I think that that's something to look at.
All right. Before I let everyone off the hook, I want to just let everyone know about our next talks of the semester. So we're going to have Pat Moynihan from Pew Research Center on March 25th on this talk about comparing survey modes. And we have also Kamin Chung from Newcastle University on a talk about autocratization spillovers. So thank you, Alexia. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for all the good questions. And I see everyone on March 25th.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Bye. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.